Hi, and welcome back to Dogs Do Speak podcast with Colin Spence and Samantha Wayland. Today we have a really fantastic guest, Bethany Bell, and Bethany's here to talk to us about canine dialogue dynamic. She's going to tell us what that's all about and how beneficial it is to dog owners, dog trainers, and behaviourists and groomers, everybody that lives with or works with a dog. So, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Bethany, who's going to tell us a bit about herself, how she got into the industry, and then we should talk more about today's podcast. So, welcome to Dogs Do Speak podcast, Bethany. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for having me here.
It's a
Absolutely.
pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you. Um, we should have gone ahead with this a little while ago due to one or two things that are out of human control. We are here today, and I'm so glad to say, welcome back to Samantha.
Thank you very
Um,
much.
you're going to see this lovely lady smile in every podcast. So, Bethany, tell us how and why did you get into the industry?
Okay, so my story starts quite a way back when I was quite young, actually. I mean, I always knew I wanted to work with animals. I never really knew exactly what it was I wanted to do until I went to college and I went to study animal care. And I was inspired really by my dad and working with reptiles and amphibians. So I was, quite used to a range of different animals. So I went to college and I studied animal care. And then eventually I got to almost go into university just before I went to university. I did do some work experience. And it was then where I went to do work experience for a well-known dog training school in Chertsey. And I just I was only meant to stay for 2 weeks and I stayed for 18 months as a volunteer because I just fell in love with dog training. I fell in love with teaching and learning, and I just wanted to learn more and more and more. So I was hungry for that information. So I started that journey really in 2010, where I started as a dog training assistant, as a volunteer. And the trainer I was working with at the time was just phenomenal. And she was always force free. She was very positive, very up on her knowledge. And I was really lucky. I've always counted myself really lucky for that because I know that there's been, a lot of crossover trainers and I didn't have to go through like muddy in the water, not knowing like what was right and what wasn't. So I started with positive reinforcement dog training, which is termed a lot of different things now, like force free and fear free. So I started that then, and then I went to university, studied animal care and welfare, animal behaviour and welfare, sorry. And then I just went through a few more dog training schools as well. So I started, as we all do when we're new, we're taking lots of different courses, reading lots of books. And eventually, when I was feeling confident in 2017, I started up my own dog training business. And I was known as Barking Up the Right Tree. And so that was really where I began. And I was doing everything like running lots of classes every week, going and to doing one-to-ones. Then I started more behaviour work. And really as well, along the journey I took on two of my own rescue dogs, and that changed a lot for me. That changed a lot because what I thought I knew in dog training was not applying to real life situations. With my own rescue boy Steve, who came to me struggling with reactivity, struggling with separation issues. I mean, he was all over the place. And I spent about maybe 4 years trying to use all the conventional methods of behavior therapy and playing games and, helping him decompress and all that kind of stuff, all the stuff that we do to help dogs with reactivity. And I'd been working with clients who were doing this before, and some of them just were fine and they were working with their dogs, and they were helping their dogs and it was working perfectly. Others were really struggling with this approach and it just wasn't working for them, and I fit into that as well. And I started to think this isn't really very this isn't right. There's got to be something more to this. And then later down the line, I actually ended up getting another dog that started as a foster, stayed with me for a long time. And I learned a lot from her. And she was really the reason why I had to really force myself to look outside of the box, because she also was not fitting in the box of conventional training. She did not like training. She did not. She was very much her own dog, and I really respected her for that. But what was really happening then was it got to about 2020 and a lot changed. A lot changed. Obviously, we had a lot going on with lockdown. I suddenly had a lot more time to think and to really research new things. Then I came across the study that was done, that was looking at the dog's brain and human language. So I was looking at that study, and suddenly something just clicked. And I was hearing other voices at the time as well, just speaking about being dog centered, coming away from certain aspects of training. So somewhere down the line, everything was just, it was just changing my mind. I was just coming from real conventional training, and I never really set out to think I'm going to do something completely new. But I just wanted to help my own dog, both of my dogs that were struggling, and also I really felt that there was something missing, there was just something wasn't quite right. It wasn't quite making sense. So I went on this journey, heard lots of other voices, and then over the course of between 2020 to 2023, I just started to accumulate all this different knowledge. It took me a long time to change my perspective as well, because that's something that you have to give your brain time to do. You can't just force yourself to accept something different to what you're used to hearing and learning about. So I think from about 2023, that's when I really started to make the CDD method and form it into its own thing. So that's kind of like me in a nutshell. So that's really where it started and how it kind of became it. But I have actually written that in my first book, which is Barking Up a New Tree. And that's really talking about my journey, what led me here, the struggles that I was going through, and, how I kind of developed the CDD method. And that really takes you on that journey.
Okay. And just very quickly, you can mention them at the end as well. What's the other book called?
Redefining reactivity. So that was my second book, and that was more, it's more of a how-to guide. So my first book is more going through all the background and everything that it took to develop this method and the theory of the method as well. But redefining reactivity is how you apply this to help your dog with reactivity, how you can rethink what reactivity actually means, what it is, what it isn't, and really just get into the grits of what that actually is, because there's so many misconceptions about reactivity. So I put it in a book to kind of have it more as a how-to guide.
That sounds absolutely awesome. We'll come back to both books a little later. So, right here and now, CDD, canine dynamic, sorry, canine dialogue dynamic. What is it?
So it's a holistic way of teaching and living with dogs. It's not actually training, in the sense that training and teaching are two different things, which I think we often get mixed up and correlate them to as two things together. And they often work together and they can overlap, but they're two very different things. So it's teaching, and it's doing it in a more of a natural and holistic way. So I see it as more natural learning and how dogs are actually naturally learning, rather than using conditioning all the time. So obviously, I know we all know that conditioning is a natural way of learning. We've got conditioning, desensitization, but I don't focus that. I don't use it as the main focus to get what we want out of a dog. And it's kind of switching it to, what do I want my dog to do, to what does my dog need me to do? What does my dog need from me? And also we do acknowledge that yes, it's important that we can have that balance where we need our dogs to do stuff as well, but it's having more of that even keel, a bit more balance, where we also need to think about how the dog is feeling about doing certain things, and how overtraining a dog to respond to everything we do in cues, how that can actually affect how they learn and their ability to learn. So it's taking away rigid rules, making it into more of a relaxed way of teaching, but it's respecting the dog as a dog. So it's allowing them, you know what, they can be dogs. It doesn't matter. They can be dogs. They don't have to, respond to me at the snap of a finger. They don't need to, always be alert, waiting for my next command. It's something where, it's a relationship. And although I know that does happen with force-free training, it's just really enhancing that part of it a little bit more, where we're actually focusing on dialogue and speech and teaching our dogs language in a way they can understand, so that we can communicate much more effectively, rather than just one syllable sentences or one syllable words or simple sentences, where that's where we're kind of at with dogs at the moment. That's quite common. So it's really just going through a very different perspective of how we communicate with dogs and how we see dogs and how we understand them.
I love that, because if you think as well, if we're having a conversation even with another person and we ask that other human being to do something, the chances of them just going, I'm going to do it right this second, are so slim, and we don't expect that from them. We don't expect people to drop everything and go, yes, I'm coming right this second. We might, if I shouted to my partner, he might go, yeah, give me a minute or whatever, and I'm okay, that's fine. But we seem to expect a lot of the time that robotic automatic response from our dogs. So do
Yeah.
you find with your approach, because from what you're saying and how you're explaining it, I can imagine that it's brilliant for, obviously I work with overseas dogs, and I can imagine it's really good for those type of dogs that they've never had any training before. They've just made their own decisions their whole lives, and then all of a sudden are in a home. So I can imagine your approach would be very beneficial for dogs like that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely beneficial for all dogs, but specifically dogs from overseas, specifically dogs that have PTSD or trauma. It's really good. And the reason why is because these dogs come over, they've known nothing different. Like they know how to survive, they know how to make their own choices, they know their own mind. Then they're kind of taken and put into a country, put into a home with expectations that now they have to obey, now they have to be obedient, now they have to do everything we want them to do. And that is so unnatural for them, because they are just like, why do I need to do this? I'm used to doing this. And even if we just extracted that part and looked at the other, all the other background stuff, like they're not used to walls, they're not used to being in a home. I mean, some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. So they're having to learn a whole different way of life. And, it's particularly hard to teach them how to conform to that particular way of behaving. And it doesn't really allow for that natural thought process and natural choices to develop.
That is quite interesting. 'Cause my take on it also is that the world of the dog has got smaller and smaller and smaller. So when I look at dogs that are coming from abroad, I don't think we're far behind with dogs just here in the UK,
Mm,
that are that far from dogs
yeah.
that are abroad, with so much going on, so much expectations from humans, so many cues that are thrown at them, second after second after second. I think it was Samantha that mentioned robotism. Dogs are very much robotic in this day and age now. Yeah. So when I listen to what you have said in the past and following what you do, I totally understand this concept. I think it's a way to go. Um, One thing that people probably would be asking is, can you give us a scenario of how that all fits in? For argument's sake, let's just say there's me teaching the dog to sit, or the dog is sniffing, and I want to move on. How would that change from the way I train? Yeah, not that I do that. I don't tell dogs to move on when they're sniffing, but you get the gist. I'm trying to play devil's advocate, so to speak. How would I go about getting that dog to come along with me, or do something different?
So it would be a combination of, first the question needs to be asked, why do I need to get my dog to do this? Why does it need to happen? So my example a lot of the time is sit. Does my dog need to sit in order, quite often, I mean, I know that I'm not talking about competitive sports or anything like that. I know there's requirements in terms of that, but I'm talking about normal day-to-day life, people that just have dogs for being part of their family. And I actually went and I asked a lot of my clients and previous clients, why do you need your dog to sit? I'm not doing it in an argumentative way. I just want to know what the thought process is, because I need to understand that so that I can go through the motions of why we actually need to do it and what we can do instead. And quite often it was just, I just need my dog to just stay calm for a minute. I just need them to wait for a minute. I just need them to sit while I put the food bowl down, so they're not like spilling the food everywhere while I put it down. So a lot of it's like impulse control. So like I just need my dog to sit by the door while I open it so they don't fly out. And so it's actually looking away from the motion of sit, coming outside of that for a second and just thinking, well, so you're kind of wanting a wait. You really want a bit of impulse control and self-restraint in times of safety, when it's necessary. And sit isn't necessary to create a wait. Why does a wait need to be very, very still? Why does a stay need to be very, very still? Why does a sit need to happen? I mean, in a lot of cases, dogs don't actually naturally sit in the way that we've trained them to sit. And a lot of breeds specifically, that puts a lot of pressure on their joints as well over time of repetition. So it's not something that's very natural for a dog to do. So if someone was saying, I want my dog to sit and I don't want to train it, I want to teach it through the CDD method, I would firstly say, well, what do we need the sit for? Because then, if it's just for waiting, then I'd say, well, let's just teach a wait. And a wait would look very different to a trained wait. So a wait would be like, you just teach your dog to wait in an area, but they don't have to be frozen. They don't have to be rigid like a statue. They can be, just wait there a second, because I'm just going to open the door. Can you hang back a minute? And the dog can be standing, the dog can be laying, the dog can be doing whatever they choose to be doing. They can even be walking around, they can be pacing, as long as they're just not coming towards what I'm asking them to wait away from. That's the main goal. So I look at the goal of what someone's trying to achieve. And if it's, 90% of the time it's safety reasons for doing this. So I go, okay, well, what can we do to enhance that in a way where it's more natural, it's less rigid, it's less like do this and you have to respond. So I say my cue and you need to respond immediately, and then you need to be really still and rigid. So one of the reasons I actually came away from that is because when a dog is in that frozen position, it can put them in fight and flight, because it's activating that part of the mind. It's teaching them to be frozen. Obviously, it does depend on the individual dog and it depends on the context surrounding that. But in terms of teaching a dog to wait or teaching a dog self-restraint and impulse control, I would do that by firstly teaching the 5 phases of dialogue, because you can't really teach a dog something if they don't know what you're saying and what you mean. So I would break it down, and I've broken it down into a system of 5 phases of dialogue, which starts with word association, which is the really simplistic. You're just timing that with if I want to teach my dog to wait by the door, then I need to teach them what I mean when I say door. So I would walk, every time I walk through a door, I just say I'm going through the door, and I would time it as I'm opening the door. I say door when I'm opening the door and closing the door. And then that would turn into a very simple sentence. And then that would turn into narration. So I narrate what I'm doing, and I'm just talking in a very natural way. It's not too instructional. Obviously there will be some instruction, so like wait there a second is an instruction, but it's not a rigid strict instruction. So it would be a process of teaching them how to wait naturally and just understand what I'm saying in the context that I'm saying it, because they can understand different contexts when it's not really rigid, because we're not using or overusing conditioning to a point where everything has to be only applied in this particular context, because I want what I'm doing to be applied to all different contexts. So it really is just a case of firstly find out what it is that you're trying to achieve, like why and what do you need to do it for, and then how can we then do that where it benefits the dog and it benefits us too.
I love that. You're speaking to my heart right now, because it's one of the first things I always say is, but why do you need your dog to sit? But I find, and you probably do as well, a lot of people say, well, that's just what you do. It's the first thing you teach your puppy. That's the first thing you teach is a sit. And there's no real reason for it, just for the fact that everyone who approaches your dog will go, I've got a treat, sit. And if your dog doesn't sit, they look at you like you're a crazy person because you don't have a sitting dog. So I think it's just, for some reason, one of those things that we've all got in our heads. We must walk our dogs for 1 hour a day, and our dogs must sit for a treat. Those are the rules of having a dog. And I found actually everything that you're saying. One of my rescue dogs, Sylvie, when she came over from Romania, when she arrived, I tried to get her to sit, because that's what we did. And we even, at one point, I was holding a bowl with Christmas dinner in it for her, and I was like trying so hard, and she was just like, I'm just not doing it. And then all of a sudden, it's similar to what you're saying, just clicked, and I was like, why does she need to sit? If she's standing there wiggling, because she wiggles for everything, then that's fine. That is more than enough. So yeah, everything you're saying is just, yeah, you're speaking to my heart right now, Bethany.
Really, I'm so glad. Because one of the things as well, like I mean, we do have the reason of, okay, well, we that's just what we do, it's what we've always done, and it's the first thing we do teach. And it's a really interesting point you make. It is the very first thing we teach it. As soon as puppies come through the door, as soon as a rescue comes through the door, it's sit. They have to sit for everything, and so it's questioning why. And I think another reason as well is something that I've seen a lot, is that a lot of people, if we move that on to down, lying down, one of the reasons why people do that is because they want their dog to settle. It's sit and then down, and then that puts them into a settled position. And so one of the things that was another light bulb moment for me when I was first questioning everything that I'd learned. I mean, that was a big journey and a big part of it. I had to question everything and not just blindly accept what I was told. So one of the things I questioned was, is lying down settling though? I mean, if I was panicked, if I was excited, if I was, over-aroused and I was just a bit all over the place and someone said, right, lie down, has that changed how my mind is feeling? Because otherwise, I don't think it is. I think that what happens, and what can happen quite often, is that you're just conditioned to respond to that movement. So you go, okay, well, I'll lie down. And then this is where we see like these fizzy dogs where they're lying down, but they're so focused. Like, oh, give me the next treat, give me the next treat. They're trying so hard. And you can see the dog's state of mind is not calm. It's anything but calm, because, when you're asking a dog to calm down, it's a process of what's going on in their mind. It's a process of what's their emotional mind doing, how are they feeling, what do they need to do to calm down. Because quite often when we talk about us, whether it's adult or children, lots of people need different things to calm down. Some people need to go for a walk, get that movement out so that they can calm down. Other people find that that's too stimulating, so they might need to like sit down and read a book. So it just depends on the individual. So it's teaching dogs how to feel calm, when they need to, but how to come from that process of being so up high to gradually going back down into that calm motion. Because saying to your dog, calm down, as we know, doesn't help. Because imagine if you're, either really excited or really angry or really anxious, and someone says to you, calm down. Well, we know that the response there will be that person's going to get their head bitten off. So it's the same with dogs. They don't saying calm down or putting them in a position that will put them into what looks like a calm position doesn't actually tell the dog to feel calm. It's just telling them to go through the motions despite how they're feeling. And that's a very clear difference in what I do with the CDD method. It's really looking at how the brain is working, how the brain is feeling, how the dog as an individual is feeling, or what they need, rather than really focusing on trained behaviours. I mean, I don't focus on that 99% of the time. I don't really need trained responses for what I do. And with my clients, again, I do give them the choice. If you're, as long as you're not putting training at the forefront instead of your dog's mind and feelings and emotions at the forefront, you can apply it with force retraining very, very easily. But some people just choose that they don't need it, and some people enjoy it, and some people's dogs enjoy it, and some people's dogs don't. They find that training can put pressure on them. So it's all individual, differences and preferences and what you need. So when it's looking at what do I need my dog to do, it's definitely questioning, well, is that actually going to give them what I'm trying to give, trying to get them to do? Is that actually going to help?
Mm, the more you're talking, I've been thinking about power, dominant, um, what's the word? Wanting the dog to do something because we want them to.
It's that
So
ultimate
when
control, isn't it?
control, yeah. So, and I can completely see that. Yeah, I'm very mindful when I'm training how I'm communicating with my own dog. Just the same I would with clients' dogs as well. But I can actually see whichever way we fluff it up, it's control. And why does the dog need to sit when it's not really appropriate or necessary? I would rather my dog stand or lay down or choose to sit, but still self-regulate. Yeah. For me, that's a dog that is making her own decisions and choices and living happily, as opposed to me imposing, you will sit, you will lay down, you will stand up, you will walk nicely, you will do this, you will do that. So I get it. The only thing I would say for anyone watching this, how do they incorporate that with a dog that is, let's just say, someone really is into this, and I think most people listening to this will be, because it makes more than sense. How would we incorporate with that over-excitable spaniel?
So if we're looking at over arousal and hyper arousal and that can tip into mania as well. So we need to recognize the differences between these terms as well, which I see again and is overlapped a lot. So it's looking at telling the difference between excitement, because I think a lot of people think excitement is a bad thing. Excitement means that your dog is out of control. But if your dog is excited because there's something going on that's exciting, that's a natural emotional response that I want my dogs to have. I want my dogs to feel excitement. But when they're going into over arousal and the excitement tips into mania, and spaniels, I love the example breed there because they are very, very typical of going, yeah. as as I have two spaniels myself, I can definitely say this is something we've lived with. So it's recognizing the difference between when my dog is excited, when they're tipping into over arousal, when that can turn into mania, because it can still all look like excitement if we don't know what we're looking for. But when we look at mania, we look at over arousal, and when we recognize how that can feel, we know that that isn't a pleasant feeling. So excitement, pleasant, great, we like being excited. When it tips over into something else and it turns into over arousal, hyper arousal, or sorry, the word's completely gone, mania, or mania, we know that doesn't feel good because your mind is racing. You can't slow down your thoughts, and then you're just all over the place, and that is going to cause a bit of a meltdown. So that is a process of teaching a dog how to self-regulate. So in that moment, obviously, if we haven't done anything in the background, if we haven't done anything to build up a dog's understanding of dialogue and understanding of emotional regulation, then there's not an awful lot you could do in that moment. So it takes that process of building up the foundations of the dog's understanding of dialogue, understanding ourselves, what our dogs are saying at the time, so we can kind of be a step ahead of the behavior, so we kind of know what we're looking back and going, I can predict what my dog's going to feel in this moment because I know my dog well enough. And obviously that life happens and we're not always going to be on the ball all of the time, but it's also just recognizing that when it's starting to tip over, how do we then bring it down a notch? Now, quite often the conventional method is, okay, get the treats out, do some scatter feeding, tell the dog to sit, do some training, or whatever that approach might be. You can do it in several different ways. My way of doing that would be different. So we would actually recognize, okay, the dog is completely out of control of themselves. This isn't pleasant for them, and we know this isn't going to be pleasant for everyone around them as well, because they might be getting jumped at, having dogs in their faces, and so this whole thing can cause a bit more than just chaos. So it's actually taking the dog out of that situation. So so that we can have some time to just decompress a little bit, talk into your dog in a slow way. How we talk, how we respond really has quite a direct influence. And quite often when you think about what we do when we see a dog like that, we almost mirror that. We're like, no, sit down, go off this way, come on, let's go. And you see how that's not that calm. That's actually quite fast. It's quite, I'm actually becoming quite animated. Whereas if we want a dog to calm down, if we need a dog to calm down for their own sake, it's more, okay, let's just take a minute, come on, shall we go outside for a second, come on, let's go and see what's over there, and then let's just bring it down. It's not so much a case, especially to start with, of my dog is up here, I need to say something and it just brings them straight down here. It doesn't work like that. It goes down in phases. So you can see that mind has gone up and now it's coming down. You might get a little bit of fluctuation where it goes up a little bit again and then you bring it down. But it's just bringing that down and teaching them how to do that in moments where it's not too out of control, where you can actually apply it in natural occurring day-to-day things, not something we need to particularly set up, although you can here and there through playing and games and stuff. But it's more of a case of, not thinking of it, right, I need my dog to calm down right now, this second. They need to cut it off and shut down. Like, we need to know that this is a gradual thing. So we need to bring it down with our energy. We need to bring it down. Sometimes it might be a change of scenery. Sometimes it might be that we need to get the focus onto something else. Sometimes it might be that they just need, let's just say, for example, this is a greeting, people have come in the house and the dog loves people. Sometimes it's a case of just asking the guests to can you just sit down a second and we'll calm it down, I'll go make you a cup of tea, rather than just standing in the doorway, getting all hyped up, because that's going to make the dog feel even more out of control. So it's really, there isn't a set thing that you need to do, like you need to do this one magic thing and it changes everything with all dogs. It would need to be what we do in that moment, in the context of what's happening with that individual dog. What do they need? How can we, sometimes, for example, some dogs just need to go for a little walk around the block with the guests as they're coming in the house. It might be, okay, well, we're going to be outside the house, go for a quick walk, get that greeting done while there's lots of other things to focus on. The dog can sniff, the dog can do stuff, but also we're communicating and everything's not so intensive because it's not solely just focused on this particular greeting in a small space. Then by the time you're all coming in again, that release can, your dog's had that release, they've had that kind of energy burst, they've been able to regulate their emotions through sniffing, through listening, through greeting someone where there's other things going on. So the person just becomes less of the main focus. But that's just one particular example.
I love that, because the psychology of it is how we would deal with people. So if you took the word dog out of a lot of that, that's how we would deal with other people. And I don't know about you, Colin, but to give you a bit of background, Bethany, Colin and I are both ex-police officers. And when you're in the police, you're taught about conflict resolution, So if you go in and somebody's up here and you go in and you're up there, you're just going to keep on going. Whereas if you go in and someone's wound up to here and you come in a bit lower, they're going to start slowly coming down to your level. So when you're explaining that, that's exactly how my brain went. I was like, oh, this is exactly how you would deal with a person. So again, it's just changing that thought process of we should demand things from our dogs, but we wouldn't demand it from anything or anyone else. And it's just the psychology of it is, for me anyway, it's so similar.
Yeah, definitely, because it's going through the mind. We're looking at how the mind works. We're looking at the mind, from humans to dogs, being a mammal's brain. And obviously we know there are major differences, but there are a lot of similarities. We can work with those similarities. We can relate to those similarities. And that's really what I employ in everything I do with the CDD method, is looking at how it feels and how the brain works. And, I think a lot of people, not everyone, a lot of people are kind of coming away from being so shocked by that thought. But I do think that sometimes when you're used to having this complete separation of a dog having a dog brain and a dog having dog emotions and dog thoughts, and they're not humans, they're not children. And I think I've been on TikTok, I've just joined TikTok, and I was saying about, the similarities between dogs and children, and people who had come from the background of perhaps more of a outdated approach were very offended that there was this similarity, comparison of similarities between dogs and children. And although I'm not saying that dogs are exactly the same as children and we should treat them exactly the same, because we do have to be respectful of the differences, but equally we should be respectful of the similarities of how we would treat and think and view dogs. And that we know that dogs can feel emotions. We know that it's not too different from how we feel emotions. It just is it's a little bit more simplistic in the sense that they don't tend to complicate things with the way that we do, because we're very, very good at overthinking and complicating and having a lot more of that kind of network of emotions. But dogs definitely do feel emotions, and they do think the way that we do. And a lot of psychology, when we actually look at the background of psychology, the psychology we applied to humans came from the psychology of animals, and so there is a major link between dog psychology, not just dog psychology, but animal psychology and human psychology, and that's why we've used it and had that crossover between humans and animals in the psychology that we extracted it from came from animals, and so we can flip it the other way around too.
So would I be right in saying that the human behaviour will most definitely have an impact on what our dogs do next, how they perform, how they communicate, will they trust? Yeah. So instead of having the approach of the you will do, sit, you will do, down, you will do, get back here now, yeah, taking a more, it's not that, can't find the right word today, being a Monday. um, Having that approach of, is self-preservation the word I'm looking for? Thinking more about the person or dog in front of us, using the right behavior that is, we are self-regulated, yeah? The dog is more likely to slow themselves down in that arousal moment, yeah? Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. So a lot of it is based on the dog's ability to self-regulate. And if you're only teaching a dog through training, the likelihood of them being able to self-regulate will be less, because they're used to you telling them what to do in those moments. So they're less likely to be thinking for themselves. So that's part of why it's, stepping outside of training, not fully, if you're really into training and you love training. I mean, I always love training. So it's not about saying training is bad. It's not, but there are some elements of training that cannot be good for a particular dog, or for all dogs. If we're talking about outdated methods and things like that, obviously that part of training is not so good. So it's looking at, okay, but if I'm coming away from training and I'm teaching instead, and I'm really helping them in a more holistic and natural way, then we need to teach a dog who can't regulate how to regulate before we can expect them to perform it in a high arousal state. So it does take some practice, it does take some building, but they need to definitely have a good relationship with the person that's asking this of them, because they need to have trust that the person isn't putting them in a situation they're not going to be ready for, or isn't going to get cross with them for not doing it perfectly. So obviously there's definitely a big element of trust, and that having the relationship, having that connection with your dog. So if your dog is trusting you and they know that there's no consequences for making a mistake, they're going to be much more likely to be able to then think about what you're saying rather than think about what might happen. So they're going to be much more focused on your words. And really it's looking at another familiar approach is the term grounding. It's a grounding. It's like having your words, your guidance as an anchor, just to bring them back down to reality, particularly if a dog is going off in anxiety, particularly if a dog has PTSD. Your voice becomes an anchor. It becomes, your words and what you're saying and the meaning behind what you're saying can become very, very grounding for a dog that is starting to lose themselves and lose control, and not having the ability to regain that control back. But it is just teaching, and this is what freaks a lot of people out, I think, is teaching a dog how to have that control rather than us having that control over them all the time. So it's actually teaching them how to have the control. It's not throwing the control at them and saying, you're on your own now, work out for yourself. That has to be a gradual process of teaching them that they have choices, that they have the decision, that they can make those decisions themselves, and that they have the ability to be more control of themselves, rather than just teaching them that they don't have the ability to do that. Therefore, they need to listen to our instructions at all times and they don't get the chance to think for themselves. So you would start that by obviously don't give them choices in situations where it's dangerous, but you teach them how to make small choices to begin with, and then you build up their ability to think through their decisions, think through their choices. And also, whilst we're doing that, we're recognizing when a dog is making a choice and when it looks like they're making a choice, but they're actually not making a choice. They're just reacting. Because quite often we see this with dogs that are struggling with reactivity, that people think they're making a choice to react and people think they're making a choice to get closer to the trigger, when actually they're not. They're not thinking at all. They're just reacting. They're responding. It's instinctual at that point. So it's not where there's any thought process of I can calm myself down in that moment, because they're not in the thinking part of the brain. So it's also understanding how to shift from the emotional part of the brain into the intellectual part of the brain, because when the emotional brain takes over, it's going to stimulate and activate the instinctual part of the brain, where we know when the dog is in instinctual part of the brain, no learning is going to happen. Therefore, no thinking is going to happen. So it's understanding the dog's state of mind, their individual preferences, what they need, what they're asking for, what they're actually saying they need help with, but handing them that control back. Because when you're handing control back to someone, it's empowering. It's actually saying, you've got this, you can do this, and I know you can do this, but I'm here to guide you. And so when I use an analogy for that, it is very much like teaching a child to ride a bike. We start with using stabilizers. We start with being really close with them. Eventually, we start to see that they're showing that they have got the ability and the confidence to do it. So we start letting go. But we're not just going to let them go, give them a shove and go, right, you know it now. We are going to stay very close in case they stumble, in case they need guidance again. So we stay close. And then as they get better, we take more of a step back and let them go and do the bike ride. Then we take the stabilizers off, and then we do that all over again. So it's very much similar to how we would hand control back to a dog. And when a dog is when they have control of their own lives, they feel more in control. When we take control away from them, they feel more out of control.
So I was laughing about the stabilizers because I must have been a very bad parent because stabilizers didn't exist, and yes, I did give him a little shove. You did it. You did it. You did it. Coming back to, let's just say, for someone or people that are listening to the podcast, watching the podcast, and they would like to start this approach. Is there somewhere they can go? Is there a group or a course or something that can give them more info?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've got several things at the moment. I mean, the first place I would go to is I've got Facebook groups. So I have got two main groups. I've got one for people that are struggling with reactivity. So I've got a group there, and I've got lots of information, lots of free information in the guides and the featured section. So there's a few videos and lots of information in there. And for people who just want to learn the approach and then not struggling with a dog with reactivity, then there's the Canine Dialogue Dynamics group, which is a bit smaller, and I have to admit I do need to put a lot more information in that, but that one's just there to kind of teach you this is how you can apply it to your dog. If you have a dog that's struggling with reactivity, then definitely go into that group. There's also the book to help you, and there's a course as well. I have got an online course, and that's quite in depth. So there's lots and lots of information in the course. And I've also got some courses for raising puppies, raising adolescent dogs, raising adult dogs, and I've got a free course for rescue dogs as well, because that just goes through an overview of what to do. It's very much specific to rescue dogs, but it does show you how to implement some aspects of the CDD method method. And so yeah, there's lots of places you can go, but the books are definitely very good. I have got a couple more books in the making as well, so there will be some more resources to help you too.
I did hear a little birdie said that you might have an announcement that you're making this week, and I am itching to find out what it is. So I'm hoping that you'll give us a little bit of a clue before you leave today.
I will do. Definitely remind me. I'll mention it at the end. Definitely remind me, because I'm happy to announce I'm very excited for this release.
And as for the books, where would one be able to buy the books, get your books?
Either through Amazon or directly through me, because I've self-published them, so they are definitely going to be quicker to get them off of Amazon. But like if you don't want to use Amazon or you want a signed copy, just contact me and I can get one sent to you.
Okay. And just remind people the name of both books, please.
So the first book was Barking Up a New Tree, Rethinking Dog Training. And that one is really going through the process of my background, how I developed this method and the philosophy of the method. And then I have another book called Redefining Reactivity, which is a very specific how-to guide to apply the CDD method to reactivity and also learn about what reactivity is and what it isn't.
Okay, great. And if people want to get in touch with you, how will they be able to do that? Got a website, email address?
Yeah, I have got a website, email address, or on Facebook Messenger or WhatsApp. I'm on across quite a few platforms, but maybe I could link those in, because on the top of my head I wouldn't be able to remember right all of the details there.
Okay. Bethany, it's been absolutely amazing.
Good.
I would say 99.9% of everything you have said, funny enough, cannily enough, I'm already doing.
Brilliant.
It's really weird and strange.
Yeah.
You just don't realize it. Before we go, for instance, I use the wait and the stay. Wait is rigid if it's an emergency. Wait, please don't follow on. My stay is, I don't care if you're sitting or standing or walking around. Yeah, just stay there for a moment. I'll be back. Yeah, and there's nothing rigid about it. Yeah, and when you mentioned that, I just thought, I love this. I love everything you have said today. So
Absolutely.
thank you for coming along.
Yeah,
That's all
definitely.
right. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm excited to announce my next book, which will be coming this week. So this one's a bit more of a different one to my usual style of writing. This one's actually a novel, but it's kind of a different kind of one-of-a-kind book, where it's written from the dog's point of view, from a rescue dog's point of view, going through the process of being rescued, having trauma, having PTSD, struggling with reactivity, but it's really getting into the mind of how the dog is thinking and feeling, because I thought this would be a really good way of, rather than me just saying this is right, this is wrong, this is this is that, which could be helpful for certain aspects of it, but when you're hearing it from a kind of more of a realistic way of how a dog does think and how a dog does feel, then we can really relate to what that journey is. So it's a very, very emotional book.
Just going to say, it's going to make me cry, isn't it? I can tell already.
It is.
I'm going to read this and I'm going to sob.
I did cry while I was writing it. I have to admit, there were real tears going through this book, but I wanted to make that connection between how dogs feel, how we can really understand and relate to everything that was happening. And it goes through the journey. You know, there's lots of other characters in there for dogs that have come in from abroad and how they must be feeling, and it's very, very realistic to how a dog must think, feel, and go through, you know, when we're looking at like PTSD And people don't always realize that dogs can get PTSD, and when they do, they don't always, they just think, well, it's just a quick fix. And with a lot of the books that come from a dog's point of view, it usually ends at the rescue, like the dog gets rescued and it's great. But I wanted to put that realistic element that it doesn't just end there. This is where, the rescue part of this journey is a major part of the book. The process, the things that most people go through, where they're going, how come my dog, was fine, it was 3 months ago, and now all of a sudden they're starting to become reactive. And it's really showing you how that was all building up inside the dog internally. So I won't give too many things away, but that should be, is in publishing stages this week, so that should be out. But it's there to help us make that real connection to rescue dogs, but not just rescue dogs. If you don't have a rescue dog, it's a really good thing to read, just to really get inside the mind of how a dog is thinking and feeling.
You can stick me down for a pre-order of one of those, because I already know that I want to read it. So
Brilliant.
Well, I'm definitely going to be getting that book. Yeah. I
Fantastic.
don't want to talk too much about books because, I'll leave that one there for now. But this has been an absolutely amazing topic to discuss. And you would definitely be on my mind and Samantha's mind to come back and give us some more.
I could talk to you for hours about this.
Yeah.
I really could.
I think we will look at the book and take some stuff and bring to a podcast, read the book.
Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Yeah, I would be very much up for that. As you've probably realised, I could talk a lot of times.
No, I love
I'm
it.
very, very talkative, but I am very passionate. So I would love to come on and talk until you need to tell me to be quiet.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Until the next time, it's goodbye from myself and Samantha and Bethany. Until the next time, cheerio.